Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us on the Gold and Steel podcast, where we talk all things Vegas Golden Knights. As usual, I'm JP. I'm here with my partner in crime, Ian. And quick summary of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover some big breaking news. The Coyotes' new arena proposal was rejected. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about fan reactions to the Final Four in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. We'll do a quick review or wrap up of the Vegas Edmonton second round series, and then of course a series preview of the Vegas Dallas series, which of course means that Vegas got out of the second round. Ian, what do you think, buddy? They did it.
They did, and it was a bit touch and go. We were talking on the last cast about the fact of how important Game 5 was going to be and what that led for Game 6, but Vegas did exactly what we wanted them to do. They got it wrapped up. Made Game 6 look a little easy at the end. And he did it in Edmonton's shop as well. I mean, that's a heartbreaker for the fans. But hey, that's hockey.
That's hockey. Yeah, big win in the other team's barn, and we'll do a little wrap up of that series in a couple of minutes here. But let's talk about some NHL news. I mean, big shocker, Ian. This just broke a few hours ago, and you and I have talked about this on this show a number of times, and we're both strongly opinionated about it, but it finally happened. The citizens of Tempe voted, and they rejected the public referendum for the Coyotes Arena and Entertainment Complex proposal. I mean, that's got to be it for them. That's got to be it. What else? What other option do they have? They've got to be relocating now, right?
They have to. I mean, look, we talked about it before. We knew this was coming. We kind of highlighted this was a reality. Well, was a potential outcome that has now become a reality, and it's a resounding answer from the market that they don't want the team. And I think for Bettman to continue to push it like he has done, I think it was a poor move. When we talked about Bettman before, we said that he was staking kind of, not his reputation, because it's more than just what happens to the Coyotes, but he was staking a lot on being able to turn this around, and was adamantly and being very stubborn and saying, look, this is what we're doing. They're staying in Arizona. And all the cards were going to be dealt when this vote went down. It hasn't gone the way they wanted. Personally, I'm glad. And the reason why I'm glad is not because I don't like the Coyotes. It's because I think the best thing for the franchise is just to reset, to move somewhere else, change name. Don't become the Houston Coyotes, okay? Just change name, restart, refresh. You've got an absolute ton of draft picks. You've got a perfect time to reboot your franchise, start again. And that's what this needs. The answer is clear. I know the vote was close, but it doesn't matter. Like, you're talking to someone who's in the UK. When a vote is done, it's done. You can talk about maybe redoing or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's done. If it was close or not, irrelevant. Yeah. The reality is, even if it was close and it swung the other way, that to me doesn't tell me you've got a great market. That tells me you've got an indecisive market that's not sure whether they even want this sport. So I think it's time to move. Now, the question is going to be, where do they move to? And lots of people are going to think this is going to be Houston. I really hope it isn't. I think Houston deserves a hockey team. I think they could easily house a hockey team. Texas is massive, and having Dallas and Houston is going to be no problem whatsoever. But I kind of feel like Seattle and Vegas have proved that the expansion draft works. It's a good system. It's proven to be successful. You've had a team that nearly made the conference final in their second year, a team that made the Stanley Cup final in their first year. Why on earth would Houston want to buy damaged goods? So I think for me, they'll be looking elsewhere. And I also think Bettman kind of knew this. So Bettman was talking to other cities, but I'll tell you the two cities it won't be. Okay, this is my hot take. I can't reach the media board. If I could, imagine some flamey sounds, okay? My hot take is this. It's not going to be Houston, and it's not going to be Quebec. So for Quebec fans, if you listen to this podcast, get that idea out of your head straight away. I know you're all there going, yeah, but it's not going to happen. It could be Portland or something. I'm not saying it particularly won't be Canada, but I just feel like it's It's probably going to be the US, and it's probably going to be the east side of the US. And I think they're just going to move them, and it'll be like what happened with Hartford, what happened with the Winnipeg Jets, where they move and it's total rebrand. So
new name,
not something Coyotes, total refresh. But it's breaking news, it's shocking news. But at the same time, I'm not shocked.
It's shocking because it finally happened. But you and I have gone on rants about this on several episodes over the life of this show, and we both saw this coming. We both knew that this was a last gasp for the team. I think most people did. And look, I will say, I feel bad for the fans if that's what ends up happening. If you lose your team, it's got to be a terrible feeling. I can only imagine in their shoes if the Vegas Golden Knights got shipped off to another city. So this is not a mark on the fans by any means. But I mean, when a franchise is run that poorly for that long, I don't even know that it speaks to the market. This franchise is cursed with poor management. I think I read today, they've had 7 different owners in 25 years or 30 years, however long they've been around. They've been in financial trouble. The league had to come in and take over. They've almost never ice a winning team. They don't pay their bills. And the reason that's why they can't find a home, because they're financially either insolvent or mismanaged, and they don't pay their bills. And everybody in the Phoenix metropolitan area knows that. And they've tried several, and Tempe is just one of many cities in a giant urban sprawl in the Phoenix metropolitan area. And this was their last chance. They hadn't tried Tempe. So they're like, well, that's a good location. Let's give that a shot. But most of the other cities, the other small cities that make up to medium-sized cities that make up Phoenix, they don't want any part of it. And so, if the fans are going to be angry, be angry with the management, the ownership, and I'm sure they are. It's like I said, and certainly not trying to rub salt in the wound. It's really sad. But like you said, it's now what I'm curious about is if they relocate, that I'm assuming that does that automatically mean a sale? Because if it continues to be the same ownership group and management, then what will change? Right?
It's a good question.
How does that work? I don't know enough about it to know how that works.
It can be the same owner.
Yeah.
So they don't have to physically change owner to do it, but it would make sense to start again. I guess the problem with that is, will you find a taker? Because I think the only thing that's had a worse marketing campaign than the Arizona Coyotes is Bud Light. So it's, it's going to be, it's not an easy thing to just get a new owner in. Again, you're kind of looking at, do I take on the Coyotes or do I just pay and buy a new franchise from the start?
Yeah.
It's like, how much the Coyotes actually going to go for? Because you're not going to pay anywhere near like expansion level money, right? Because why would you? So
exactly,
Ottawa obviously set the bar, but Ottawa's a totally different franchise. It's got its own troubles, but it's in a fantastic market. It's in a hotbed of hockey. It's got great prospects. It's improving year on year. I think same owners, which maybe means it'll end up being a Western Coast team, like a Western Coast location. I just don't think it would be Houston. And I think Houston would be silly to take them.
Sure. And San Diego is another name I'm hearing thrown around a bit there. I suppose San Diego certainly has a large enough population. I'm not sure that Southern California honestly needs another, or California in general probably doesn't need another NHL team. I mean,
and it didn't work. Didn't San Diego have a team? The Seals,
the California Golden Seals, but I want to say those might have been in the Bay Area, up north. But I'm not sure if San Diego's ever had one. But I could be wrong. Any listeners who know that factoid, feel free to throw it into the comments on YouTube or on Twitter and let us know. But it's a sad day. We knew it was coming, and I think that the problem needs to be rectified. So it's good that they're going to probably have a reset, unless they're able to figure something out. But still sad. You feel bad for the fans, but it finally happens, and that's it. And
we're not going to have any news for a while. The only thing that I'd noticed on here was that Bettman, his quote was, that we're going to evaluate all options with the ownership group and make a decision. So if Bettman's he's a smart cookie, right? Like him or hate him, he's not stupid when it comes to business. Yeah. He's very savvy. That's why the hockey is in such a good place right now financially, given COVID and everything else. And he's going to wait until after playoffs. There's no way on this planet he's going to let this news story detract away from what has been a fantastic Stanley Cup playoffs in 2023.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you can't tell me they haven't already discussed options. Meetings have been had. This has been discussed for much longer. I mean, they've been.
You always got to have a plan B, right?
Yeah, they've been working up to this vote for a long time. So we don't know what's happening, but guaranteed things have been already. Wheels have been turning and plans have been rolling behind the scenes for quite some time. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens there. One other bit of news, it's not really news, but maybe an observation, but it's been a lot of talk around the league, is disappointment from some fans and pundits, but particularly fans around the league, that the final 4 teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs are all in newer, non-traditional hockey markets, which is really interesting to me. I think the pundits and the league love it. It's good for the sport, but it's interesting. I can't really. It's hard for me to know what to make of that. I think some of that is Canadian pride that the last Canadian team is out, and so there's a little bit of soreness and bitterness there. You know, Canadians kind of pull together for whichever Canadian team is left, you know, because they want the cup to come back to Canada. I think there's some of that goes on. So maybe some of that's coming from Canada. It's definitely coming from the traditional markets, original 6, that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's got to be good for the sport in every way, right, Ian? I mean, that's just sour grapes mostly, isn't it? Could this
100%.
Possibly be bad for the sport?
No, it's 100% sour grapes. I mean, I get the Canadian thing, and this is where I annoy like all of our Canadian listener base. But
yeah,
so it is what it is.
It is what it is.
You can't have parity in a league and then complain that the same teams don't get to the final every year. Like I don't get the argument for this. I want to be in a league where all 32 teams have a chance of winning the cup at some point in time. Not at the same time. Let's be realistic. You're in a window. You're out of a window. I mean, look at Chicago Blackhawks. You're very much out of a window, but they'll get back into it. And that's the whole reason of parity, is that if you draft well, you have good free agent signings as an ownership group and a management team, you do the right things on and off the ice, you have a chance of being successful. So I want to see all 32 teams have that chance at various times. And that means you're going to have cycles where, you know, it's Vegas and it's Dallas. And Dallas are a prime example of a management team. And this is going to, we'll talk about this a little bit later, I suppose. But Dallas haven't really had any like standout first round picks for ages. They haven't tanked. They've done a very good job of actually just staying in their window and drafting smart. And, you know, hats off to them. This is the second, at least the second conference final they've been to in a couple of years. Yeah. They got to the Stanley Cup final. I can't think when, but
2020
they did.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm only a stats guy. I can't even remember that. Jesus Christ. But and then on the East Coast, Florida in their conference final, that's fantastic. They've been in the shadow of their the little brother of Tampa Bay for years now. Almost a joke as a franchise at certain points. They've had to rebrand on all kinds. They've looked like they were going to relocate at times. I think it's fantastic, and I think if fan bases don't like it, just don't be so sour, man. Just accept that it's not always your team every year. And would it be great to see a Canadian team lift the title? Of course it would. And everybody thought it was going to be Calgary this year, but they didn't. And that's just life.
Yeah, that's how it goes. And I felt particularly, and we're going to come up to this next, and it's probably this is a good way to transition to this actually, felt a lot of pushback from not just Edmonton fans, but just generally Canadian pundits and experts on Vegas's victory. It was really interesting. And I'm just going to say this quickly. I'm not going to obsess about it. I posted about it on Twitter and it got a pretty big response. But there was the Sportsnet broadcast in the wrap up after Game 6. One of the pundits, a former player, said something to the effect of, hey, if you run the simulation over and over again Edmonton's going to win, at least half the time and probably go on to win the Stanley Cup. To me, that is just the most absurd thing I've ever heard a national pundit say about a sports result. That's kind of like
it's pointless.
It's kind of like kids in the backyard playing sports saying "do over." I wasn't ready. Like, I don't know. And I know some of that is it's a Canadian broadcast, and fair enough. You got your teams that you're pulling for, but I really felt that bias towards the newer teams in the league, that sort of lack of respect. Like, I mean, it is what it is, but let's do a little wrap up on the series, on the Vegas Edmonton series. They did it in 6, and ultimately, I mean, Ian, what do you think the difference was? I have my thoughts on what the difference was ultimately for Vegas, and a lot of that was 5-on-5. But what did you see? What was the difference maker for them?
Clearly, it was because the simulator was broken. Because I completely just... And you know what? That's the one thing. Just flicking back to that for a second, mate, because as a Brit watching American sports, I find the punditry nauseating at times.
Yeah.
Everybody's amazing. It's like watching Lego, that Lego song, like everything is awesome.
Everything is
awesome. Team can be losing 6, and I'm like, oh, but man, they tried so hard. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, just say their crap.
Yeah.
But they won't do it. So I'm not surprised. And the bias between home and away commentary is insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't get that in English sports because you don't have punditry is supposed to be unbiased.
Yeah.
But informative, and that's the way that it works in the UK.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not shocked with that, but I am a little bit disappointed with those comments because I completely disagree. I feel like the difference certainly in the last couple of games is that Vegas kept the penalties in check. They did they gave some away, but you could see the way the fans were reacting in Game 6 when they got a penalty, how frustrated they were. There wasn't more.
Yeah.
And Edmonton's game plan of just piss Vegas off so that they give up away a penalty wasn't working.
Yeah, that stopped working. Vegas got wise to it. Yeah.
Big factor. Factor.
Well, it's interesting what you say about the pundits because, of course, in the United States, and I'm not sure how it is in the UK, but in the US and in Canada, there's 2 different kinds of broadcasts, right? We have regional broadcasts and then we have national broadcasts. And of course, regional broadcasts, you expect a degree of bias towards the home team. That's pretty standard. Yeah. We expect that here. It's the national broadcasts that are supposed to be neutral. Generally, we expect them to be neutral. And that Sportsnet broadcast where he made that simulation comment, that was a national broadcast in Canada. It was not Edmonton's regional team. At this point in the playoffs, the regional teams, the regional broadcasts stop after round 1. So from round 2 on, they're all national broadcasts here. So if you just watch it in one place. So, and in Canada, of course, they have sometimes their own broadcast teams, their own studio analysts. But so I get the bias was more Canadian than it was team based. I think all of those guys, and it's McDavid, right? The league loves McDavid, and they were all, but that's just one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. To have a national pundit kind of discrediting Vegas's victory by saying, well, it could have gone either way. It's like they beat him in 6. Yeah. And the final score on Game 6 was what, 5-2, I think?
And it could have been more, to be honest. I mean,
could it have gone either way? It could have gone either way as like a Game 7 in OT, a lot of close games.
Vegas, Edmonton, Vegas is like they had that stranglehold and they finished it off. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Dallas, Seattle. Yeah, of course. That could have gone either way.
That could have gone either way.
A couple of little bounces. The first goal, for example, that Rope Hintz scored, a little breakaway, but a breakaway that kind of came from a bit of a tussle in the neutral zone. Guy gets away, gets a goal. I totally understand if the pundit had said that after a Game 7.
Yeah.
Well, he just said something along the lines of, it could have gone either way. I mean,
right.
But I felt Vegas did a great job in Game 5. They did a great job in Game 6. I was really impressed. And also a shout out, and I'm probably going to shout this out a few times when we come to our quick fire questions later. But Aiden Hill, that's coming in, high pressure scenario, not a lot of experience generally, but certainly not a lot of experience in the playoffs. And I thought he didn't obviously post a shutout, but it was his stats. He's got the second highest save percentage in the NHL in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And you could say it's a small sample size. Who cares? It's high pressure scenarios, and the kids stood up. So fair play.
There was a pundit on Twitter today that apologized to Aiden Hill for disrespecting him because he, like a lot of people in the league, a lot of people don't know much about Aiden Hill, and they don't know what he was doing earlier this season before he got hurt. And so this pundit apologized and said, I wasn't familiar with your game, and I apologize for disrespecting you. A lot of people expected, they think, oh, this is Aiden Hill, this is the backup, they're 3 or 4 goalies in. In reality, earlier this season, he was settling into some outstanding goaltending, but he only got 3 or 4 starts before he got hurt.
Yeah.
And so what I saw was what I was seeing earlier this season, like the game he played against New Jersey right before he got hurt, where it was arguably one of the best goaltending performances in the entire league of the year. And a little shaky at first, right? Little shaky at the beginning of the game 6 there, just nerves, right? Hostile barn. It was a kind of a loosey-goosey start. But once he settled in, and I think the goalie coach for Vegas is doing a great job as well. He has this, I mean, he's very calm in the crease, very positional. He's a big guy. Like, it was impressive to watch. And I feel I have confidence in Hill going into this next series. But no, I totally agree with you. He was solid. And before we move on to the conference final here, you know, what happened with Edmonton? Where did they fall short? Of course, everybody's been talking about this, but you know, I was nervous about Vegas facing Edmonton. Edmonton looked like a scary, dangerous team to me, and they are. But where did they fall short? I mean, for me, ultimately, defense and goaltending. You can pick on a few things, but ultimately what cost them in the last few games of the series was defense and goaltending to my eye. But what do you think, Ian?
Yeah, definitely defense. I mean, I'm kind of a bit biased, I guess, because I like Stuart Skinner as a goalie. I think he's their starter going forward, so I don't want to be too critical of his performances. But the defense is, I'm not a big fan of it. I think it's something that Ken Holland needs to work on, because it's just not strong enough. But then they've got a similar problem to other teams. You know, they've got 9, nearly 10 million sunk in Darnell Nurse. It makes it hard then when you've got X amount of million sunk in McDavid and Draisaitl to start getting a really strict. You know, if you're going to be that offensively minded, you're probably going to have to sacrifice a bit of decap. So
yeah.
I felt like they lost it because they just don't have depth. You know, I know that the Vegas, we kind of talked about Vegas' depth beforehand. And I know one of the comments you made was that Edmonton fans are adamant they were deep all the way through. I just don't think they are. And I think there's a lot of kids, because it has to be a bit like Toronto. There has to be kids, because otherwise the salary cap situation doesn't work. Yeah. So you got people like McLeod who didn't play poorly, but McLeod's not got NHL experience. Whereas having somebody like, you know, Phil Kessel or Tanev or something like that, I feel like if they'd had a better bottom 6, they really would have pushed Vegas to 7. Because when Vegas took control of games, it was because they could run 4 lines. And essentially, unless Edmonton got them on the power play or got themselves on the power play, they eventually just wore Edmonton down. Yeah. Because it just keep coming and coming and coming, you know? So,
yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, even if, you know, and there were some Twitter users, some Edmonton fans who posted some stats and stuff, and the regular season stats do show that Edmonton has some good depth, but depth doesn't matter if you don't play the depth, right? So that's another thing that Edmonton doesn't play that style of game. Like, you may have some depth in your 3rd and 4th lines, but you don't roll 4 lines. And especially in games 5 and 6, what I saw was they roll out. They were putting McDavid on one line and Draisaitl on another. They were keeping them separate, but then, like, as soon as they're trailing, they put them both out there in a super line, right? They put McDavid and it's McDavid, Draisaitl, and they put them out there, and then they come off for a shift. It's like they're out there every other shift, and they're playing long shifts. And so I get it. That's your firepower. I understand. I don't blame them for doing that, but that's not a team that wins with depth, right? And so I guess that's what I have been getting at, and certainly got in some debates with some Oiler fans. You know, they're talking about the team's deep. It's like, but that's not your asset that you play. You don't You don't really play your depth. You lean heavily on your star players and your power play. Vegas rolls 4 lines, and they're not afraid to roll 4 lines. They're not afraid to put any line out against any line. And that's
they
what
perform.
Exactly.
And they score. And that's like, we look at the Edmonton scoring. Okay, McDavid and Draisaitl have got insane numbers because they're insane. But then you look underneath that and you're like, where's everyone else?
Yeah.
Where's Nugent Hopkins? Yamamoto had an okay series, but I'm like, that really who we're going to be falling? You're going to be putting. Whereas I feel like people like Marsha Show, obviously, he played fantastic in Game 6, but that's where you were getting your goals from. In the preview for the next series, I looked at where are Vegas' points coming from, and Eichel's the top scorer in the team, but realistically, as we kind of expected, the Vegas team has just got scoring throughout. And if at different nights, it's different people.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised in a series if one of your players doesn't turn up and it's a big player like a Nugent Hopkins, it hurts you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was part of it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Cassidy might have made a few tactical adjustments as well that really helped them in games 5 and 6. And you really could see it in game 6. But Edmonton largely was playing a man-to-man defense, and Vegas, this may have been the plan all along, but they executed it very well, particularly in game 6, which was the way they were cycling the puck. They were forcing Edmonton in that man-to-man situation. They were forcing lost coverage. They were forcing guys to lose their man, and they were drawing these plays up on all of the broadcasts. How many times Edmonton players just lost their man, and it was something about the way Vegas was cycling the puck, the way they were moving the puck around the zone, crossing over. And it's not to say that probably wasn't the plan. All teams like to do that against a man-to-man defense if they can, but they figured out how to do it, and that cost them on at least 2 of Marchessault's goals, and that's the difference maker in the game right there. So it was interesting. And listen, I know there's probably zero chance in hell that any Edmonton fan is listening to this podcast, but on the chance that you are, respect. Edmonton is a fantastic team. The Oilers are a great team. So I am not crapping on Edmonton. It was a tough series, but if we're going to analyze, where things went wrong, that's what I saw. And I think also, once again, teams and people tend to sleep on Vegas a little bit. Maybe the team didn't, but everybody seems so surprised. I'm not, but I'm also a fan. So, but it's great. Win in 6. Now Vegas gets a little bit of rest, and moving on to the conference final. This will be the 4th time they've appeared in a conference final in their short 6-year history, which is pretty incredible. Dallas, I kind of was quietly hoping for a Seattle Vegas conference final. I love that story, but like you said, that's not how it panned out by 1 goal. So, but anyway, this is a rematch of the Western Conference final in the bubble in 2020. So a bit of maybe a revenge match for DeBoer, who of course just got let go in Vegas last year. I mean, he would love to send Vegas packing. And then of course it's a grudge match for Vegas, who got sent home in 5 games in the bubble, but 2 very different teams now. And
yes, very different.
This is a good chance for us to do, we did this last episode or the episode before, but we're going to do some rapid fire questions. Anything you want to add about this series before we dig into these 2-minute quick shots here? Or you want to save it for the 2-minute section?
I'm really excited. I love the playoffs anyway. I love the format. This is where hockey for me gets real. Vegas Dallas is a fantastic matchup. Seattle Vegas would have been interesting because I think it's 2 very, very different teams. I think there's a lot of parity between Dallas and Vegas, which will make it interesting, but makes it a different kind of cocktail than what we would have got if it was Seattle there. I think, like you said, I'd forgot about the bubble, but that again proves how successful Dallas have been. And nobody's sleeping on this matchup. Tell you that, nobody's sleeping on this because everybody knows these are the 2 Western Titans. Edmonton would have been in that mix as well. I'm with you. I'm sure there aren't any listeners from Edmonton, but what I will say is, if you keep building and you add a few things, and you may have to let and Nugent Hopkins go to make this work. But they can win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, Edmonton's
they
close.
Can win a Stanley Cup.
They're close. Yeah, it's kind of like, I liken it a little bit to Colorado when they kept kind of missing just barely, right?
Yeah.
And the year that Vegas knocked them out and McKinnon was so frustrated, Colorado was a scary good team. And it was like they were just, and then the next year
they a few pieces.
Yeah, and they just steamrolled over the cup the next year. I would not be shocked to see Edmonton do something like that in the near future. So, I mean, and look, Oilers fans don't want to hear that from a Vegas fan right now, and it doesn't matter because none of them are listening anyway. But in case they're listening for spite or to choose my words so that you can criticize, listen, respect, hard fought series. And yeah, but anyway, yeah, let's talk about Dallas. And this is something we did a couple episodes ago. So what we're going to do, and get your timer ready there, Ian, we each will pose a question to one another about this series, and the person answering has 2 minutes to answer the question, 2 minutes strictly. And then what we'll do, if you're listening to the long form version of the podcast, you can just listen straight through. But we like to do this so that we can, there it is. He's got it ready, and I've got mine too. We like to clip these because of the Twitter time limit and just some short form content. So we'll clip these 2 minute segments and upload them to the Gold and Steel Twitter profile. So are you ready? You got your timer going here, Ian? You got, I'll tell you when to go. And here's the question. What strengths does Dallas bring to this series? And then in parentheses, another way to look at it is, what will Vegas need to watch out for? So put your finger on your timer. You have 2 minutes to answer the question. Go.
Okay. So there's 3 areas that Dallas bring to this, and they're different to Edmonton. It's a very different team, as we were saying a second ago, very different setup. First things, face-offs. Dallas has the best face-off percentage in the postseason, which is not a surprise because down the center, they are deep. You've got the resurgence of Jamie Benn. He's somebody to watch out for in this series. He's got a chip on his shoulder because most people said he was done, and he is far from done. He had a fantastic regular season, and he then carried on in the postseason. The other person to watch out for is Rope Hintz, who is Dallas's top goal scorer, scored the goal that put Seattle to the sword, essentially, in the final, but he's been very, very consistent. Another classic example, by the way, of Dallas drafting well. It's not drafting top 3, but drafting superstars in those lower picks. Next superstar is Jason Robertson. So he is, again, somebody to watch out for. Had a really awful series against Seattle. I don't think he scored a point. He certainly didn't score a goal. If he gets hot against against Vegas, problems. So I expect it to be close. That's the second of the 3 points. Expect it to be close. This isn't going to be a 5-game series. This isn't going to be a 4-game washout. This is going to go 7. I have this horrible feeling, guys. This is going to be painful, and it's going to go 7. Because the last thing I want to talk about, I've got enough time to do this, is goaltending. It's going to be key. Right? It's going to be massive. But well, on the Dallas side, you've got Jake Ottinger, who is fantastic. This kid is superstar next level. He's going to be one of the goaltenders we're going to be talking about the next 10, 15 years as being Vasilevsky style and quality. So if he stays hot, and he's been pretty good in the playoffs, then Vegas have got a game on their hands. So for me, it's face-offs, it's scoring, because they do play 4 lines like Vegas do, and it's goaltending. That is 2 minutes, mate.
Yeah, 2 minutes exactly. Well done. Boom. Well played. Yeah, good stuff there. And as you said, Dallas is a juggernaut of a team. I'm kind of with you. I expect this to be a long, hard series. So, all right, it's my turn. 2 minutes. I guess maybe I'll turn it over to you. Makes more sense for you to ask. Do you have the question there in front of you, or do you want me to ask myself?
I don't have the question. You don't have to ask yourself. It's all good. So again, because we're going to be clipping these for those people that are just listening to this clip, this is our quick fire question, similar to what we did for round 1. We're doing it for round 2. So JP has 2 minutes to answer the following question. Hopefully you got your timer ready, buddy.
I've got it ready.
I'm staring at a question. So
I've got it ready to go.
Good stuff. So the question is, how will this series differ against the series with Edmonton? So 2 minutes starting now.
All right. First of all, Dallas is a more balanced team than Edmonton, for sure. Edmonton, as we've discussed already, is extremely top heavy. compared to the rest of their lineup. People say they're deep, but when you've got two of the best players in the world on your top line, that's a top-heavy team. I do think Dallas relies on their top lines more perhaps than Vegas does. Vegas rolls 4 lines a bit more than Dallas, but Dallas is definitely a more balanced team, and you can expect more of that rolling at you line after line, more of that kind of consistent onslaught, which is similar to what Vegas brings. But in the Edmonton series, that was definitely not the case. So I think expect that here, and that will contribute to this being a closer series. I don't think there's going to be as many blowouts. Like you said, like 5-1, 5-2. There was a lot of that in the Edmonton-Vegas series. I think you're right. I think we're going to see closer games here, maybe a lot of 1-goal games, maybe some OT games. Vegas hasn't played an OT game yet, I don't think. So we're probably due for one of those. I also think it's going to be, as you've mentioned already, it's going to be more of a goaltending battle. The Vegas-Edmonton series, I would not call that a goaltending battle. That was more of an offensive onslaught kind of series. And this is going to be one of the, I don't expect this to be as high scoring a series, like you said. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to Hill versus Ottinger. And then one other little thing that may be a factor here, there's a bit more reconnaissance. DeBoer coached this team for 2 or 3 seasons. So DeBoer knows the players on Vegas very well. There's a lot of inside intelligence already, and that can be an advantage. So, and DeBoer is great at shifting strategy in games. That's one of his strengths. And so I expect Dallas to be able to roll with the punches a bit better than Edmonton did. But that's another major difference. And I think I did it. That's 2 minutes exactly. There you go. Boom.
Boom.
So cool. Good stuff.
Well done, man.
One more question. And so on this one, we're going to do a minute each, right? Is that what we agreed to? That's what we did last time. Last question. And we'll each do a minute. So I will shoot it to you first, Ian. I'm going to adjust my timer to 1 minute. You do the same. And if you're ready, I will hit you with the question. What are the keys for Vegas to win the series? You have 1 minute and go.
Okay, so we're going to keep with the same theme. So goalies, Aiden Hill needs to stay like he's doing at the moment. He needs to stay healthy and he needs to stay performing well, because it is going to be a goalie battle, as you rightly said in the previous question. The other one is face-offs. They've got to win the face-off. The centers have got to play. They can't be getting chucked out and then the wingers come in and we start losing easy face-offs, because it's not going to be the power play battle that we saw against Edmonton, but it is going to be a possession battle against Dallas. And that means that you've got to keep possession, win those face-offs. That's really, really important. And then the other area, and this is one we haven't really talked about in these 2 other questions, as physicality. Dallas are not a weak team. They're not seen as being a massive, massive team, but they've got some big guys and they don't have a problem hitting and they don't have a problem playing that physical board game. So that's something that Vegas have to be really, really conscious of, is that physical level.
Excellent.
That's the 3, man.
All right, there's your 1 minute. I'm going to start my 1 minute right away. So I will say Eichel needs to keep doing what he's doing. I was looking at a stat earlier today. Vegas are 7-0 in the postseason when Eichel scores, and they are 1-3 when he doesn't. I don't think that's an accident. Fortunately, Eichel has been dialed in. He's acted like he's been playing in the playoffs for years. I haven't really seen any jitters or adjustment from him. He seems really comfortable. So he needs to keep doing what he's doing. Another thing to bear in mind is Dallas has lost 5 games. Vegas has lost 3. Dallas has played 13 games. Vegas has played 11. That means there's been more rest built in there for Vegas. Dallas is more than likely a little more tired, a little more fatigued, a little more beat up. And we know the playoffs are a battle of attrition. So they need to wear Dallas down and take advantage of the fact that when you go on a deep run like this, players are hurt, they're tired, and Vegas has the advantage. They're healthier and more rested for sure. That's 1 minute. Those are the keys. Good stuff, Ian. Wow, I'm pretty pumped that Vegas has gotten this far and gotten this far in 5 games and in 6. I mean, they're in a.
Doing well, man.
Going back to what I was saying there too, they're very healthy. I mean, they're pretty healthy for this far in. I know, right? I don't want to jinx it exactly. But I mean, hardly any players have missed
Other
any
than
time.
Brossois, obviously. Brossois was a loss, but then Aiden Hill stepped up, so it hasn't felt like a loss. I think that's why if you're talking to most fans, they probably forget he got injured, because Aiden Hill just kind of stepped in and it carried on through.
Right.
Look, for a team that wasn't even classed as being a contender, and those that follow us on Twitter know that I tend to rant about a few things on Twitter, but from a hockey sense, it's 2 or 3 times I've said the fact that the Athletic, the NHL.com as well, some of the other punditry outlets were quite adamant that Vegas were not a contender in this season throughout the whole season.
Yeah.
Even when they looked like they were going to win the division, and the Western Conference is still was seen as this, but when it comes down to it, they're not going to last. And they have. So
yeah,
I think it kind of fits well with Vegas being not an underdog as such, but almost being discounted. It kind of fits with the misfit mantra.
Right.
So
definitely. Yeah, they love being the underdog, and Vegas's style of play and the way the team is built. It is one of those teams. It can be easy to sleep on them, and I think Vegas is just fine with that. And actually, it's funny because I think that attitude from the rest of the league, from the pundits, from the other fans, I think that fuels the players. I think they love that. In fact, Zach Whitecloud was being interviewed by one of the Vegas press, like one of the press hired by the team. It might have been Gary Lawless. Somebody asked him, I heard this on Vegas's actual podcast, on the team's podcast the other day, but one of them was interviewing Zach Whitecloud. A lot of people haven't, and said something to the effect of, a lot of people haven't given this team credit. A lot of people think that this team was going to get blown out by the Oilers. This was before the series started. And Whitecloud's response was perfect. They love it. They love being underestimated. They love being the underdog, and they love it when everybody says that they're not going to win. It gives them more fuel to play their best. And I think even the fans are sort of embracing that attitude. That's part of Vegas's identity, is sort of an against all odds kind of team. And I think it's a good thing. It's interesting though. I watched a little snippet from the Steve Dangle podcast earlier today, and 2 of the 3 guys on that panel, Steve Dangle being one of them, but his 2 kind of sidekicks that are on that show with him, they both chose Vegas to win the cup. So,
wow.
And these are like hardcore Canadian dudes. Like, so somebody's recognizing it, right? Like by this point, people see that Vegas, and there's only 4 teams left, right? It's anybody's cup at this point.
But, how can you not? Yeah.
But I thought that was a little bit refreshing just to see that. And, whatever. We don't need the respect from the rest of the league. When Vegas does finally win the cup at some point, the rest of the league will have no choice. So, right? The cup makes everybody shut up. Yeah, it could be this year. Exactly.
What was Foley's thing? Was it like playoffs in 3,
playoffs
cup in
3, cup in 6? Exactly. And he obviously playoffs in 1. But this is the year. Exactly. So it's exciting stuff. We'll see how things go. And for our listeners, the next time we come to you, we will likely be a couple games into the series, I'm guessing, by that point, 2 or 3 games in, depending on when we record and release. But exciting stuff. Thanks again to all of our listeners for your support during the playoffs. We've had so much interaction on the Twitter profile, and we're now on Instagram as well, and starting to grow and chat with people there. And our listener numbers have been growing really fast. And so we just really appreciate all of you. And if you have any questions or any thoughts on the team, anything you'd like us to talk about on the show, feel free to drop us a note on Twitter if you're on there, or on Instagram, or the mailbag feature at our website, which is goldandsteel.vegas, goldandsteel.vegas. And there's a mailbag feature there. You can get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But thanks again, guys. Enjoy this playoff run. It's been very exciting and very exhausting. So be sure to take advantage of the rest right now. While the team's resting, be sure to rest and give yourself a mental break, because this is going to be a crazy series for sure. But thanks again on behalf of Ian and myself. We appreciate all of you. Stay safe, stay well. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.